The text came through while I was assisting customers at the boutique. I'm leaving you for my 20-year-old girlfriend and moving to Miami. I've already emptied our joint account. I didn't flinch. My hands remained steady as I helped Mrs. Peterson choose a scarf. My voice didn't tremble as I offered suggestions. The only visible sign of the emotional bomb Mark had just dropped was a subtle tightening around my eyes. I waited until Mrs. Peterson left, her purchase elegantly wrapped, before responding, "Good luck. My name is Claire, and at 38, I just received the coldest goodbye imaginable." Mark likely thought I'd be drowning in tears over his betrayal, but I was simply locking up my boutique for the day, calm and composed. The signs had been obvious for months: late nights at work that didn't match the paychecks, the sudden password changes on his phone, his newfound obsession with the gym, and buying clothes that screamed youthful renewal. 3 months ago, I found a receipt for a dinner for two at an upscale restaurant on a night he'd claimed to be working late. That evening, I'd opened a separate account at a different bank. A week later, when he casually suggested we consolidate our accounts, I cheerfully agreed, while quietly transferring my personal savings into the new one. The joint account he emptied. It had just enough to keep him from noticing any oddities. The rest of my savings was safely stashed away, and I'd kept meticulous records of every suspicious transaction he'd made. Another text: "Don't bother begging. Melissa and I are leaving tomorrow. I'll send for my stuff later." Melissa, a new receptionist at his office. I'd met her at the company Christmas party. She laughed too loudly at his jokes, touched his arm when she thought no one was looking. She was young enough to be his daughter, and naive enough to think she was the one who'd won him over. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I called my lawyer, one I'd consulted 2 months ago when I'd found charges from a hotel stay on our credit card. "It's time," I said. "He's made his move." "The papers are ready," she replied. "I'll file them first thing tomorrow." "Should I have him served in Miami?" "No rush. Let him think he's got the upper hand for now." Another text from Mark: "I know this must be hard for you. You're not getting any younger. After all, at least you have your little shop to keep you busy." Little shop, I repeated to myself. The boutique I'd built from the ground up. The one that made more money than his middle management job. The one whose profits I'd kept carefully separate from our finances. I smiled, imagining the certified letters waiting for him in Miami. Let him savor his fleeting victory. That evening, I stayed in the housemaid house, inherited from my grandmother and kept solely in my name, despite Mark's repeated suggestions to add him to the deed. A stroke of good luck that, while organizing the paperwork my lawyer would need, I found our wedding album. Mark had looked so different back then, for his midlife crisis turned him into a caricature of himself. Now, he wore shirts too tight for his softening middle, trying desperately to connect with the younger crowd at his office. Mark's texts kept coming, each one more patronizing than the last. "I've been planning this for months. Melissa gets me in ways you never could. You'll be fine. Maybe you'll find someone closer to your age. I already told my family, and they agree we've grown apart. It's nobody's fault." I screenshotted each message, adding them to my evidence folder. Let him dig a deeper hole. My lawyer would appreciate the confession in his gleeful admission of premeditation. The last text made me pause. "By the way, I used the joint card to book our flights and hotel. Consider it my parting gift." I chuckled. "Perfect." I called the credit card company. "Mrs. Harrison speaking. I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately." "Certainly, ma'am. Can you specify the charges?" "2 first-class tickets to Miami booked today. Charges from the Royal Palm Hotel. Also, I need to remove my husband as an authorized user." "Do you have documentation of the fraud?" "I have text messages from my husband admitting he used the card for travel with his girlfriend after draining our bank account. I'll forward them." The representative's tone was professionally polite, but I could hear the satisfaction in her voice as she canceled the charges. Mark and Melissa would show up at the airport tomorrow to find their tickets invalid and their hotel reservation canceled. Another text from Mark: "Don't worry about the house. I'll let you stay there until you find something smaller." I laughed aloud. Did he honestly think he had any claim to my grandmother's house? His ego must have been out of control. If I know best in the shop you know, the one you call your hobby, I'll be fair and work out a payment for your half. My half of the business I built, with my own savings and Grand's money, while he'd complained about ours and belittled it at every turn. I poured a glass of wine, good stuff, saved for a special occasion. This qualified. Tomorrow, Mark would learn a few hard lessons about property law and separate assets. But tonight, I'd enjoy the peace and start plotting my next chapter. Morning came with a flurry of increasingly frantic texts from Mark. What the hell did you do to the credit card? The airline won't honor our tickets. The hotel canceled our reservation. Answer me. I silenced my phone and walked into the boutique. Friday was our busiest day, and I had a new shipment of designer handbags to unpack. Life goes on, even when your husband runs off with a receptionist young enough to be his daughter. Around noon, his mother called. Claire, dear, Mark told us everything about how controlling you've been, how you drove him away. He says you're being vindictive now and causing problems with his travel plans. I put her on speaker while I arranged a window display. Did he happen to mention emptying our joint account and charging first-class flights for him and his girlfriend on our credit card? Silence. Then, well, Barbara said, you left him no choice. You've been cold and distant. I'll be back at 11. Barbara, I have his texts. Want me to read them to you? The one where he boasted about taking our money, or maybe the one where he mocked my age. Another pause. He did seem a bit cruel. I told him that text was out of line. I appreciate your call, Barbara. I've always liked you, but I think it's best we end the conversation here. My lawyers advised minimal contact with Mark's family during the proceedings. Proceedings? Yes, already. Goodbye, Barbara. By the afternoon, Mark's sister, Amanda, was sharing family gossip with mutual friends. Apparently, Mark and Melissa were stuck at a budget motel near the airport. Miami was on hold for now. Mark had tried using his personal credit cards, but those were maxed out months ago. Another detail I noticed. My lawyer called with an update. The emergency hearing is set for Monday. With his admission of emptying the joint account and the credit card fraud, we're in a strong position to freeze his assets. Has he been served yet? Not yet. He'll get the papers at his new motel address. Speaking of which, his girlfriend's social media is providing some great evidence. She's been posting about their adventure all day, including some lovely comments about you. I smiled, thinking about my own pile of documentation. A year's worth of hotel receipts, credit card charges, and text messages proving premeditation. Mark had been so focused on his grand escape that he never realized I was quietly observing, always a step ahead. Another buzz. You think you're so clever, but I made copies of all the boutique's financial records. Half of that business is mine. I forwarded the text to my lawyer. Let him try to stake a claim. This was just another mistake in his growing list. He'd soon learn about separate assets and business ownership the hard way. Monday's hearing went exactly as I hoped. Mark showed up in his midlife crisis wardrobe, a tie designer, jeans, and a blazer that screamed desperation. Melissa stood outside, clearly out of place under the harsh courthouse lights, her youth painfully evident. My lawyer methodically presented our evidence, Mark's mock text about draining our account, the fraudulent credit card charges, and a string of hidden expenses. Every piece was carefully collected over months of quiet monitoring. Your Honor, Mark's freshly hired lawyer began. My client admits to making some rash decisions, but Mrs. Harrison's actions have been vindictive. Calculated, my lawyer interrupted. You mean prudent? He continued. My client took steps to protect her separate assets and maintain thorough records of her husband's suspicious behavior. That's not vindictive. That's good business. The judge reviewed my documentation, the house deed in my name, the boutique's papers clearly in my control, and the meticulous separation of finances Mark had always belittled. Mr. Harrison, the judge addressed him directly. You admitted via text to intentionally draining a joint account and using shared credit cards for your trip with your girlfriend. Do you deny this? Mark shifted uncomfortably. I was just trying to make a clean break. By committing financial fraud, the judge raised an eyebrow. And now you're claiming rights to property that's clearly separate from marital assets. The business grew during our marriage. Mark's lawyer tried again. My client is entitled to the business that was established before the marriage. My lawyer didn't miss a beat. Mrs. Harrison has maintained strict separation of business and personal finances throughout. We have documentation of every dollar earned and invested. I watched as Mark's confident facade began to crack. He thought this would be easy: empty the accounts, run off with his girlfriend, and made a claim half of my business in the divorce. He never took the time to understand why I was so particular about separating everything. He mocked my record-keeping as obsessive. The court finds sufficient evidence of financial misconduct, the judge said. All share assets are frozen pending dissolution. Mr. Harrison is ordered to return the funds removed from the joint accounts within 24 hours. But that money's gone. Mark protested. We spend it on. Then find a way to replace it. The judge cut him off. And Mr. Harrison, the court takes a very dim view of using joint credit cards to fund a trip with your girlfriend. Outside the courthouse, I heard Melissa asking Mark about their Miami plans. His response was lost in the sound of my heels confidently clicking across the marble floor. As I walked back to the business he never respected. The next few weeks saw a string of desperate moves from Mark. He tried to claim the boutique had been his idea. He insisted he'd invested money early on. He even suggested he'd been my business partner all along. But those claims fell apart quickly when I pulled up my records. He's getting desperate, my lawyer observed. His girlfriend's social media shows they're staying at her studio apartment now. Turns out living on a receptionist's salary isn't the glamorous escape he imagined. Mark's family started reaching out, but their tone was shifting. We had no idea. His sister Amanda admitted. He told us you were cold, controlling, that he had to escape, but then we saw his text where he bragged about taking your money. That's not the brother I thought I knew. His mother called again, this time in tears. The things he said about your age, about replacing you with someone younger. I raised him better than that. I thought I did. Anyway, I let their calls go to voicemail. Their support might have mattered weeks ago, but now, it felt like rats abandoning a sinking ship. The boutique continued to thrive, ironically fueled by local gossip. Women started coming in specifically to show their support, often leaving with more than they planned to buy. My ex tried something similar, one customer said, while picking out a designer handbag. Thought he'd take everything in the divorce. Men like that never expect us to be smarter than they are. My phone still buzzed occasionally with texts from Mark, swinging between anger and manipulation. You've ruined everything. I never meant to hurt you. You regret being so vindictive. Can we work something out? That business would be nothing without me. I forwarded each message to my lawyer without responding. Let him dig his hole deeper. Through the grapevine, I heard Melissa was second-guessing her choice. Apparently, living with a middle-aged man who couldn't even afford his own place wasn't a romantic dream she'd imagined. She started posting about toxic relationships and learning from mistakes. Yesterday, my lawyer mentioned that she'd removed her relationship status from social media that morning. I almost felt sorry for Mark. Almost. But then I remembered his laugh after telling me he'd emptied our account. The casual cruelty of his comments about my age. The way he'd assumed I'd be helpless without him. Instead of pity, I felt pride. Pride in my foresight, in my quiet strength, and in my ability to protect myself. While Mark had underestimated me, the final divorce hearing painted a very different picture than the one he had imagined. His cocky demeanor had all but disappeared, replaced by a barely concealed panic. Melissa was conspicuously absent. She'd moved on to a co-worker her own age. According to office gossip, Mark had shown up in his old clothes, the designer wardrobe, presumably returned to help repay the joint account he'd emptied. His lawyer looked worn out, likely from attempting to find loopholes in the documentation I meticulously gathered to prove the separation of assets. Your Honor, Mark's lawyer tried once more. Despite the separate property documentation, my client contributed to the growth of his wife's business. For moral support, my lawyer interrupted, like these text messages belittling Mrs. Harrison's business as a little shop, or these social media posts calling it her hobby. The judge had clearly seen enough. The final settlement reflected my careful planning. I kept my house, my business, and all my separate assets. Mark was left with his personal belongings and a car that was worth less than what he owed on it. "You've destroyed me," he hissed as we left the courthouse. "I'll have to move back in with my parents." "No, Mark," I replied coldly. "You destroyed yourself. I just made sure you couldn't destroy me too." His mother was waiting outside, ready to drive him to his new home or house. At 45, the irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who'd once mocked my age was now moving back into his childhood bedroom, while I continued to run my successful business. "You planned this all along," Mark accused. "You knew this would happen?" "No," I answered, my voice steady. "I just paid attention. Unlike you, I understood the value of keeping good records." His mother stepped between us, clearly embarrassed. "That's enough, Mark. You've embarrassed yourself enough already." As they walked away, I heard her start in on him. "Honestly, what were you thinking? A 20-year-old emptying bank accounts, sending those horrible texts." I watched them disappear into the parking lot, feeling nothing but relief. Mark had thought he was writing the ending to our story with that crude text. Instead, he merely set my carefully laid plans into motion. My phone buzzed, not with texts from Mark this time, but with new orders from my boutique's website. Life was moving forward, just not in the direction he'd imagined. Part 3, Segment 1. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my boutique had expanded to a second location. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Mark struggled to rebuild his life, the little shop he'd once dismissed as a hobby was thriving. I hired 3 new employees and launched an online store that was quickly gaining traction nationally. News about Mark's situation trickled back through mutual acquaintances. He tried dating apps, but women his age weren't interested in a middle-aged man living with his parents. Younger women, having heard the office gossip, steered clear. Apparently, Melissa had warned her friends about him, sharing screenshots of his desperate attempts to win her back after she'd left. His career had also taken a hit. The company's HR department had launched an investigation into his relationship with a subordinate, leading to a formal reprimand. The promotion he had been expecting went to someone else, someone who didn't have a history of inappropriate relationships with receptionists. Mark tried to claim age discrimination. "They're punishing me for dating someone younger," Amanda told me during an unexpected visit to my boutique. HR just added that complaint to his file. I was surprised to see his sister in my store. Her presence spoke volumes about how thoroughly Mark had alienated his own family. "I know we didn't support you at first," she admitted, running her fingers over a silk scarf. "He played the victim so well, but watching how he handled everything afterward, I'm ashamed we ever believed him." My lawyer kept me updated on Mark's continued attempts to challenge the divorce settlement. Each petition was denied. He even tried arguing that his text about emptying the account was just a joke. My lawyer laughed, telling me the judge asked if haha made theft less illegal. The boutique's success brought an unexpected sense of validation. Local business magazines reached out to feature my story in it as a scorned wife, but as a savvy businesswoman who had protected her interests. Young entrepreneurs came to me for advice on keeping business and personal finances separate. "The best protection is preparation," I told one woman who reminded me of Melissa. "And always trust your instincts." Mark's mother called occasionally, usually after one of his self-destructive antics. He tried online gambling, hoping for a quick fix to his financial troubles. He'd gotten involved in a pyramid scheme that promised fast returns. Each attempt to recover his former lifestyle only dug him deeper. "I don't know where we went wrong with him," she sighed during one of our calls. "His father and I offered to help him get back on his feet if he'd just take responsibility for his actions, but he's still blaming everyone else. You, Melissa, his company, the judge." I listened politely but kept my distance. Their family drama wasn't my problem anymore. My life had moved forward. filled with plans for a third boutique location and a possible expansion into luxury accessories. The only reminder of Mark's impact on my life was a framed screenshot hanging in my office's final text before I blocked his number. Have fun with your little shop. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age. Below it was my latest business award, proof that sometimes the best revenge is succeeding on your own terms. 1 year after the divorce, I hosted the grand opening of my third boutique location. The event attracted local media, and the story they wanted to tell wasn't about my failed marriage. It was about a successful businesswoman expanding her brand. Mark's betrayal had become nothing more than a footnote in my success story. During the event, Melissa unexpectedly walked in. She looked younger than ever, or maybe I just felt stronger. She shifted uncomfortably, clutching her purse like a shield. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. I believed everything he told me about how you were cold and controlling, how you didn't support his dreams. Then I watched him try the same manipulation tactics on me when things got tough. I continued, arranging a display of designer sunglasses. Those weren't his dreams, Melissa. They were escapes. There's a difference. I know that. She paused, then added, he tried to move in when you frowned the accounts. He thought my studio apartment would be temporary. After 2 weeks of him complaining about the size of my closet and suggesting I take out a loan for a bigger place, I finally understood what you meant about the difference between dreams and escapes. I couldn't help but laugh. Let me guess, had big plans but no way to fund them. Exactly. Everything was going to work out once his investments paid off, once he got that promotion, once his cryptocurrency definitely increased in value. She shook her head. I'm dating someone my own age now. We have student loans and a small apartment, but at least we're building something real. After she left, my assistant manager whispered, was that the girlfriend? No, I replied, a hint of amusement in my voice. That was just another woman who learned the same lesson I did. Speaking of lessons, I gestured toward a young couple, examining our designer handbags. Let's talk about your idea for expanding our accessories line. The boutique had become more than just a business. It was a symbol of independence, resilience, and the power of preparation. Young entrepreneurs often sought my advice, and I always emphasized the importance of protecting their assets. Then, Mark's mother called one last time, not to discuss Mark, but to thank me. You taught our family an important lesson, she said, her voice quiet but sincere, about enabling bad behavior, about making excuses for cruelty. Mark's still living at home, still blaming everyone else for his problems, but we're not defending him anymore. That's your legacy to our family, showing us the difference between supporting someone and enabling them. I thought about that legacy as I reviewed plans for a fourth location. Mark had intended to diminish me, to train me in for a younger model, and take half of everything I'd built. Instead, he'd inadvertently pushed me to become even stronger, more successful. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Mark had filed another petition to revisit the settlement. The judge dismissed it immediately and ordered him to pay court costs. Thought you'd enjoy that, my lawyer wrote. I smiled, imagining Mark in his childhood bedroom, still trying to rewrite an ending that had been sealed the moment he underestimated me. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better. 2 years after Mark's cruel text message, I received an invitation to speak at a women's business conference. The topic wasn't about divorce or betrayal, it was about building and protecting a successful business. My story had evolved from a cautionary tale to an inspiration. During the session, a woman raised her hand. My husband says I'm being paranoid, she said. That marriage means sharing everything. I smiled, a little bemused by how familiar the question sounded. My ex-husband said the same thing, I replied, right up until he tried to claim half my business in our divorce. Trust your instincts. Protection isn't paranoia. The boutique chain had grown to 5 locations, each more successful than the last. The little shop Mark had mocked was now a thriving empire, employing 30 people and featured in several national magazines. Through mutual friends, I learned that Mark had finally moved out of his parents' house and into a small apartment above a garage. After his company downsized, eliminating his position during restructuring, he had to take a lower-paying job. His dating profile still listed him as young at heart, though the photo was clearly outdated. Melissa, ironically, had become a regular customer at my original boutique location. She had earned her business degree and started her own social media consulting company. "You inspired me," she told me once. "You showed how a woman can build something lasting, instead of falling for empty promises." I kept Mark's cruel text framed in my office as a reminder of pain, but as proof of how far I'd come. Below it hung a sign that read, "Success is the best revenge." At the 5-year anniversary celebration of my original boutique, I stood before my employees and loyal customers. The space had been transformed from a single little shop into the flagship store of a thriving business empire. Mark's mother attended, though I hadn't sent her an invitation. She waited until the crowd thinned before approaching me. "I saw Mark yesterday," she said, smoothing her designer dress on she bought from my store. "He was talking about his glory days, about the life he could have had. He still doesn't understand that he didn't lose everything in the divorce. He threw it away." I thought about that text message and his casual cruelty, his assumption that I would crumble without him, how he'd expected me to beg, to break, to prove him right about my desperation. Instead, I built something stronger than before. Each new boutique location was a testament to what women could achieve when they stopped dimming their light for insecure men. The young saleswoman I'd hired last month, coincidentally also named Melissa, came over with a question about the new inventory system I'd implemented. As I explained the process, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the store window. I saw what Mark had failed to see 5 years ago, not a woman getting older, but one getting wiser, stronger, and more successful. His crude text message had been meant to be an ending. Instead, it had been a beginning just for me, but for every woman who heard my story and realized she deserved better than someone else's midlife crisis.